Hi everyone, welcome to The Blueprint. I'm Charlotte, I'm going to be your host for today, and today we are joined with Andrea White from Women Talking Fire. Andrea, if you want to just start by introducing yourself, please.
Yeah, happily. Hello, Charlotte. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Thank you to Uptick. I'm a fire engineer. I am a fire risk assessor and a chartered health and safety professional. So really happy to be here to talk all things fire safety and also talk about Women Talking Fire, which is the charity that I founded as a networking and support group for women in the UK fire safety industry and male allies as well.
Thanks, Andrea. So first question for today, why fire safety? What got you into the industry?
Like most people, I never expected to have a career in fire safety. In fact, I initially wanted to be a forester. So I spent about 4 years in the Forestry Commission, and then I toddled off to do a forestry degree with the intention to go back to the Forestry Commission as a forester. That was definitely my happy place. But it didn't happen. So I got halfway through my degree. My grandparents needed some care. So I changed my degree, moved universities and helped care for them instead.
Oh, wow.
But it did mean that when I came out of university, my degree wasn't the right one for the Forestry Commission. So no more becoming a forester. So I ended up managing the estates department in the local tech college. And nobody there wanted to do health and safety. And there was little old me, probably early 20s, stick my hand up and go, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But actually it was a really good place to learn health and safety, because in a tech college you've got all these little industries. You've got the engineering department, you've got a hairdressing department, you've got, beauty, we had animals, we had small animals for veterinary. So there were all these different health and safety issues. So I did that for a couple of years, got my health and safety qualifications, went off to the local county council and started managing care homes, not from a people perspective, but from a building perspective. So for social services, I managed care homes and day centres. And it was there that I first discovered fire safety. So I would meet with the fire officer and we would look at a building and they would say, oh, this is not right, or this needs some work doing. And it was really interesting because the council had built exactly the same building in different locations. They'd use exactly the same blueprints. But the responses I was getting from different fire officers was different. And I couldn't understand why. If it's the same building, why are they giving me different advice in different places? So that kind of piqued my interest in fire safety. And after I worked for the county council for a little while, I thought I could really do with getting some enforcement experience, because I just don't understand sort of on the other side of the fence what they're thinking. So I applied to the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, and I applied to the fire service, because at that time they were starting to recruit what we call Green Book or civilian fire safety inspectors. And I got both jobs. So it meant I had to choose. And I just decided that fire safety sounded more interesting.
Yeah.
So I went into the fire service. I was the first and only woman in my county's, it was technical fire safety back then, department. And I spent 5 years there enforcing fire safety legislation. And from there, that gave me a really good basis on which to then go out and become a consultant. I did consultancy for several different companies for a number of years. And then finally, a huge thank you to Glenn Turner. He convinced me to go out on my own just over 3 years ago. And I have not looked back since. So I'd spent that time in consultancy getting more and more qualifications. So I had my qualifications and my accreditations to be a fire risk assessor. And then I'd done, actually in the fire service, I'd done an HND in fire engineering. And then I topped that up with a master's degree part-time over 3 years in fire engineering and set myself up 3, maybe 4 years ago with my own consultancy, AW Fire. So now I do fire engineering, albeit for smaller projects. I do a little bit of fire risk assessment. And I'm an expert witness for the courts on predominantly on cladding and the issues to do post-Grenfell with residential buildings and cladding, civil cases. Which is really interesting, but it really plays to my strengths. So I've got some strengths in terms of attention to detail, ability to absorb a lot of information, ability to concentrate, ability to look at something technical but give you an answer in plain English.
That's such a skill as well, I think.
Yeah. And those skills have really, been beneficial to being able to talk to clients and explain sort of a technical subject to people who aren't necessarily technical.
Yeah.
And to judges as well. So I feel very fortunate to have got to where I am today. But like most people, I did not start out expecting to be a fire engineer.
So on that, Women Talking Fire, what inspired you? Well, obviously you've already started talking about it anyway, but what inspired you to create the group?
Yeah, so I was sitting at home like an awful lot of people during COVID. I'd taken furlough to look after my son. And I was sitting at home thinking, okay, I'm going to set up my own business. I've decided to do that and I've got some more flexibility. I can start to work a little bit less than full time, so I can start to give back more.
Yeah.
But what do I actually want to do in terms of giving back? What would really benefit the industry? And I actually gave it quite a lot of thought. Well, you had a lot of time during COVID, didn't you?
Hours.
Exactly. So I suddenly thought, you know what? When I was in the fire service, when I was at the beginning of my career, I would go to perhaps conferences and things. And I remember going to one in Kent and I was about to open the door to go in and I knew there would be maybe 100, 150 people in there. And I knew there would be no other women in there. And there wasn't. And I remember just taking this deep breath and getting ready to open the door because I was going to be the only, and that was tough.
It's an intense,
it was
experience, I'm sure. Yeah,
it was. I was much younger, and I was, female as opposed to male. And thank you to Andy Ray, who at one of those conferences actually came over to me as if he was my best friend. Never met this man in my life, and said, "Oh, hi, how are you doing? Come and get a coffee."
Yeah,
I will always be grateful to Andy Ray for doing that.
Yeah.
But I thought back to that time and I thought, you know what? There are no women in my phone book.
That's crazy.
There's got to be other women doing this work.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of seen a couple. So Dr. Barbara Lane, I'd heard of her, but I didn't know any.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any that I could just phone up.
Yeah.
So during COVID, the other thing I've been doing was learning how to do this thing called LinkedIn. So I got very good at LinkedIn, and I decided I was going to try and find some other female fire engineers on LinkedIn. And I found about 5 of them, and we set up this little group, and we did, monthly video calls. Honestly, they were an absolute scream. They were an absolute scream. Those women now have gone all over the world. We've disbanded, but I have such fond memories. And I thought, this is different. I've not had these kinds of conversations with anybody in the industry before.
Yeah.
Because I've only ever talked to men.
Yeah.
And I want more of this. And if I feel like this, maybe other women who I haven't met yet feel like this too. And that was really the start of thinking about, I think we need a women's group.
Yeah.
I really do. So I set up a women's group with the IFE. I set up a women's group with CABE, the Chartered Association of Building Engineers. And then it felt right to actually have an independent group. And that's where 2 years ago I decided that we were going to set up Women Talking Fire. So we're independent of any institution, and we really serve two aims. So one is we're a networking and support group for women and male allies. We don't exclude anyone in the UK fire safety industry. And the other one is that we want to increase representation. So when you flip through a magazine, we want you to be able to see people who look like me or you who are writing in the magazine. Or when you go to a conference, there are people on stage who look like us.
Yeah.
Because, I do totally believe in the if you can see it, you can be it. Representation does matter. I remember Mel Fazakali and several other people emailed me after I'd been asked to speak at the IOSH Fire Risk Management Conference. And it was both in person and they did it on a video link as well. They did it online. And she sent me an email. She said, I watched that. And they'd asked me to do a panel talking about, women with a number of other women and women in the industry. Fine. And they'd asked me to do a technical presentation. And she said, I watched that technical presentation and that was the first time I'd seen a woman talking technical. And she said, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want to be able to see women talking technical, because all I've ever seen previously was men talking technical. So we also work quite hard with the industry expos and just say, look, we can help you. We've got a membership of 600 or 700 members, some of whom are willing to speak on stage. If you can't find women who want to come and speak on the stage, we can help you with that, because it's important that we can see ourselves up on that stage.
Yeah, we've actually, Uptick have been to a couple of your events and they've been great. They've been so, you feel welcomed, but like you said, you also feel comfortable. So, you turn up, it's very overwhelming, these huge events, and you turn up and it feels like you're already with loads of people that you've worked with for years. So it is completely reciprocated with us, but I completely agree with that. The response that you got for Women Talking Fire, what response did you get? I mean,
our aim is to provide a space for women, and we'd love to have male allies if they, subscribe to what we're trying to do too. We don't want to turn away anybody. And you're right, we've tried really hard to create that environment where people feel welcome. Now, that hasn't been done before. To the best of my knowledge, and I've been in this industry for 25 years now, we haven't had women's groups before. So with anything new, not everybody wants change. Some people like to maintain the status quo. And I was very aware of that, this might not be well received by anybody, but by everybody, sorry. Women are about 10% of the technical professionals in our industry, but 90% are men. So I was very aware of that, and that we were challenging norms. The women have been really positive about it. I mean, as you say, we go to expos, we have a stand. Our stand is always really, really busy, and it's great. We engage more and more with men who are interested in what we're doing. And we always have a huge cohort of women who just seek us out to come and find the other women. Because if you don't have that stand, where are we going to find each other completely. in that great big hall? So I actually think the stand serves a real purpose in those expos, to kind of bring us together, because we don't have that opportunity otherwise. We did a survey last year, and one of the things we asked was, is there a need for this kind of group? Is this important enough for there to be a group specifically for women? And the answers we got from women were, I think it was 100% yes. And then they would tell us why, which was, they were really vehemently opinionated about this.
Passionate about everything.
Absolutely. And then we had some men respond to our survey, and all but one of them said, no, I don't think there's a need for this group because we've got equality now, so we're sorted. And I just found it really, I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. All I'm saying is it was really interesting that when you looked at the answers, you could split it by gender. There was one man who said, no, I can see why. And, he explained why he felt that there was a need for women's groups. But the other men, they were like, no, I can't see the point. And I have pushed back to some comments on LinkedIn who've said, do we really need this? I'm really not sure. What about men's groups? Well, fine, go and set up a men's group.
I mean, what's stopping you from doing that?
I would be delighted to. But I do remember one of the fire safety professional bodies was overseen until fairly recently, by a woman. And there was a conference and she was there and she said, right, we're going to have a women's lunch. And a man went up to her, apparently, so I've heard, and said, well, hang on a minute. What about a men's lunch? And she looked at him, apparently, so I've heard. And she said, every day's lunch is a man's lunch. We're having a women's lunch.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I can kind of see your point.
Yeah.
But we clearly haven't got that appreciation yet between the genders about the genders. And I totally accept that there are issues for men.
Yeah.
I'm not saying men have not got issues.
Yeah.
Not got things that they're challenged by. I've done a lot of research into gender since starting to run this group, particularly women. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, that's not fair. Let's flip it. I want to understand the male perspective.
Yeah.
So there's a great book called The Authority Gap about gender from a female perspective. And there's a great book called Of Boys and Men about the men's perspective. And actually, men have got some real challenges now too, increasingly, in terms of education, and they're not excelling as well as girls are at school. There are a number of issues for men. And I would be delighted if those were addressed. But my focus is based on my experience and what I can relate to and who I can help. And that's the women in our industry.
I think it's interesting that they came back with there is equality. Do you almost think that that's because there's more women working in the industry, that's what they think, it's a little bit more equality now because there's more women, but obviously still not addressing, a lot of the differences and what women experience in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. What do they say? If you haven't walked in someone else's shoes. And I do have some sympathy for that. So I remember before I set up this group, I was mentoring someone who came to me. He started a business the same time as me, his own consultancy, and he'd got a fire alarm background. And he wanted to become a fire engineer. He was going to university part-time, and he said, look, will you mentor me? You've been in the industry longer than me. You're that little bit further ahead in your career. And I said, absolutely. And we would chat several times a week. Technically, we had some great conversations. But when I tried to talk to him about anything, about me as a woman in the industry, he just looked at me blankly and said, Andrea, I don't see it. I'm not sure that's the case.
Yeah.
I've not come across that before. And he drew a blank.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating because it became very obvious that that wasn't his world, you know, and those weren't the conversations that I could have with him.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point we've got to get to is actually, okay, your experience is not my experience, but I can hear you, and I can accept that what you're saying might be true, might be real, and you know, it might not be my experience, but it is an experience that someone is having.
Just having that empathy to kind of understand it. Yeah,
definitely.
So on that, challenges that you find that you think women are facing still in the fire industry.
If you'd have asked me a couple of weeks ago, I'd have said that men are much more confident than women. And certainly with the expert witness work that I do.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I find that men, interestingly, I've not worked on the other side to an OPPO who's a woman. I've not had a fire engineer on the other side who's a woman. I've only worked opposite men, but they tend to be very confident, and I find that quite interesting because sometimes, and I've written an article about this, confidence and competence are different things.
Yeah.
So you can say something, and I can think of a couple of people in real life, you know, they say something and it sounds great. It sounds really convincing, but it's not right.
It's like those phrases. I'm gonna admit to this. I'm one of those people that will say a phrase wrong, but I say it with confidence, so people know what I'm saying ish.
Yeah.
But it is completely incorrect.
But it's believable.
Yeah.
I think people become swayed by confidence.
Yeah, completely.
And certainly, you know, when you're, you know, giving evidence and things, I can see that if you and are and you don't look,
Like hesitate. Yeah.
then I can get that. I can see that. But I do think we have to beware, particularly when women don't necessarily come across as confident as men. There are obviously exceptions, but as a generality, we don't naturally come across as confident. And I always thought that was because women are less confident than men. But actually, I heard I listened to a really interesting quote the other day, and it said, girls and women don't suffer from a lack of confidence. This is by Chloe Angyal. They suffer from an excess of experience in how the world reacts to confident girls and women. And that I found really interesting.
Yeah.
So have we always not been confident, or have we kind of had the confidence knocked out of us a little bit because it hasn't been acceptable to be confident?
Yeah.
And
Completely agree with that as well.
do you?
Yeah.
See, that's what I've been sort of pondering over the last couple of weeks, because if we come across as assertive, a man would then be designated as a leader, you know, if he's confident and assertive. And certainly my experience is if you come across as assertive, then, you know, you can get quite a negative reaction as a woman. You get told that you're bossy, or you're aggressive, or you're too outspoken. That was the one used for me. You're too outspoken, Andrea. If you can just tone it down a bit, then maybe you'll be allowed to do this.
I get toned it down quite a lot as well. Yeah.
But I wonder if the same words said in the same way by someone who looked different would be judged different. Does that make sense?
I love that. Exactly what you've explained. I don't know if you've watched the Barbie movie, but
oh, absolutely.
At the end, there is that whole speech, and I cried when I was listening to it because I was like, it really spoke. And when I was in the movie, everything that landed, the women were laughing at because it was all to do with women's experiences. Whereas male friends that I've got, cousins, I've got 2 cousins that work in the film industry, so they were interested to watch it.
Yeah.
They were kind of like, I didn't find it as funny as like my girl mates or women mates are telling me.
Yeah.
I was like, it's because you haven't experienced what we've all experienced. And so when you said that, that's instantly where my mind went, was that speech at the end of that movie.
Yeah, I absolutely love that movie. And, you know, I was always a Cindy girl. Barbie did exist when I was a little girl, but I always had Cindy's. But when the movie came out and I started to see the trailers, I don't tend to go to the cinema, but I actually took myself off on my own to see that movie.
Yeah.
And like you, I couldn't believe how much I related to it. I was like, somebody else feels the same as me. And that's another great thing, isn't it? About, you know, bringing women together. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Somebody else feels
so
like
powerful.
this. It was. And you're right. I've tried to encourage people to watch it, and the men are like, I'm not sure I really, you know, got that much out of it.
Yeah.
And the women are going, yes.
I'd watch it 100 times over
Exactly.
again. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I bought the DVD, and it's one of my, you know, what do I want to do this afternoon? I'm going to watch the Barbie movie again.
Yeah. Talking about that, what have you seen progress wise, like real progress you've seen in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see that there's more role models. So Dr. Barbara Lane again, she was obviously an expert witness at the Grenfell inquiry. She's been a role model for me for the past maybe 10, 15 years. We need role models. Hayley Burgess has been on the board of the IFE for a couple of years and was president. She was the first woman president last year. That's really important, I think.
Yeah.
I think there is more desire to make sure that there are women round the decision-making tables. So even though there's that 20 times more women, that 10% perhaps, they haven't necessarily been at the decision-making tables.
Yeah, the leadership side of things.
Exactly. So I think what I'm seeing is there's more interest from the organisers of those decision-making groups, who tend to be men, in trying to get more of a balance, trying to get more diversity of thought. There's definite benefits to having diversity of thought. If it's been proven, research has shown that if you have diverse perspectives and you haven't got this kind of echo chamber going on, then you do come up with better decisions. So I think that's a positive. I think what I'd really like to see is then more consideration given to how that plays out. So, you know, great that you've asked a woman or a few women to join a particular group or decision-making table or committee, but how do those women feel in there? Because, you know, you sit in around a table with all men, it can be intimidating, and they communicate differently. Certainly our Women Talking Fire committee, there's about 10 of us. Our meetings are very different to the meetings that I would have. I mean, I'm on a British Standards committee. It's very different from that.
Yeah.
Men do communicate differently. They're more happy to interrupt. They're more confident. And I would just like to see perhaps a little bit more consideration that women are where they are, and how can we support them to kind of have that equal footing around that table, rather than just have that representation and perhaps that tokenism of, well, we've got a woman on the committee. Well, yeah, but they haven't actually said anything.
Yeah.
Or they said something.
You haven't asked them anything. Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't necessarily supported them, so they feel they can make a contribution.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about just being there. They actually do have to. The point of them being there is to contribute.
Yeah.
And you haven't actually checked in as to whether they feel comfortable contributing or whether they are contributing.
Yeah.
So I think it's more than just having that name on the list. It's actually about having them as an active, an involved participant in that group. That would be a really good thing.
So I think that actually leads really well and links really well with the question I was thinking of now is, so obviously there's still things that are overlooked and maybe done incorrectly in the industry. Do you have anything else that you would say? So like you said, it's just having the women there, but not actually really asking them if they're comfortable or letting them contribute at all. Is there anything else that you think is overlooked currently in the industry with women?
These sort of gender-related programs or initiatives, they can be a bit of a flash in the pan. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a shame, because we are here for the long haul.
Yeah.
And actually what we need is sustained effort. So I'll give you an example. I'm a fellow of 3 professional bodies. I'm a fellow of the IFE, I'm a fellow of CABE, and I'm a fellow of the of IOSH, a chartered fellow of IOSH. And there are very few women who are fellows of any of those bodies. But IOSH last year, they had I think he was a president, forgive me, but he wanted to increase the number of women fellows. And I was completely on board with this. Mm-hmm. He organised a video call, and a lot of women IOSH members turned up. It was a great video call. Nothing since. Absolutely not. It died, as far as I can see, it died a death. And that for me is really disappointing, because I don't know which is worse, not doing that or getting people's hopes up, because it was like, yes, I'm happy to mentor another woman to become a fellow. Yeah. Because let's face it, they meet the criteria, but they don't have the confidence necessarily to go for it or whatever. Yeah. Or they don't know how to do the process. But they're nothing. And that's really frustrating. I would love to see an initiative or two that had some longevity to it. Yeah,
not like tried it once, kind of that's where we've got.
Tick, we've done it.
Yeah.
But you haven't, because the objective was to get more women fellows.
Yeah, you've almost done like a pilot of a series, and you've not actually created the whole series.
Exactly. And you've got real real enthusiasm for the series. The pilot went really well, got a lot of good feedback, and then you didn't make the series.
And then everyone's just sat there wondering what's going to happen.
Is it? You kind of got people's hopes up.
Yeah, exactly.
That to me was a little bit disappointing. Yeah, I would like to see, if we're going to do it, come on, let's do it.
So with, for example, companies that are trying to create more inclusive teams, what would your advice be to them to really make sure that people feel comfortable, heard and excited to be working in that company with this industry?
Sounds really simple, but I think if we could treat people how we'd perhaps like to be treated, or make sure that people are treated how we'd like to be treated, I think that would be a really good thing. I've had, I've been a bystander recently to several people trying to get into the industry and looking for jobs. And I have been amazed at, we're an industry where we are supposedly desperate for talent. Yeah. We haven't got enough people. We haven't got enough good people. We're desperately trying to find them. And then these people, the hoops that they have to jump through are phenomenal. Yeah. And they're ghosted. I mean, I've just learnt what the word ghosted means, but they're ghosted. Yeah. And I don't understand why that would happen, why we wouldn't treat people, because it for me, it's very short-sighted for the organisations involved, because you're actually demonstrating your culture from the moment someone sees on the website that you're advertising a job or hears about a job. And that's a massive opportunity for you to demonstrate all of these wonderful policies and processes that you've written on your website and you say that you do. Actually, what you need to do is walk the walk, not talk the talk. Yeah. And live it. But what I'm seeing is not that. And I think that we could really do better there.
Yeah.
We could really do better in terms of inclusivity, discussions on reasonable adjustments. I don't think we are thinking broad enough in terms of being flexible. I think we're still quite rigid in our expectations of what someone is expected to do and how they're expected to do it. I remember going for a job just before I decided to go out on my own, and I'm a single mum, and great job, great organisation, and in theory, in principle, I'd been offered the job, and we were talking about the practicalities. And I said, "Look, your office is in London. I cannot come in 5 days a week. My son's still at school. I can't do that, and I'm not going to manage to do 35, 40 hours a week in the office and travel." And still be standing by Saturday.
Yeah, because travel, you add on at least another 10 hours.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been more like 20.
Yeah.
So I just said, can I work from home a couple of days a week? No, that's not our office policy. I was like, wow. And there wasn't even a discussion about it.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, that's not our office policy. And I said, okay, that's absolutely fine, but I won't come and work for you.
Yeah.
Because it's not that I want this thing. It's not a nice to have. It's that I need this thing to be able to exist. I think that's the difference is, we've got women who work full time, but when you look at the stats, it is the women who do the looking after the house. It is the women who do the childcare or the caring for other people.
Yeah.
The majority of it is done, the facts are, it is majority of women. I think if you look at who gets children dressed in the morning, it's 8 times more likely to be women.
Yeah.
If you look at who gets up in the middle of the night for someone who needs care, 2.5 times more likely to be a woman. That is the reality, is that we are doing a lot more of the other stuff in order for our family to exist.
Yeah.
And not just the doing, we're also much more responsible for the mental load. So it's Ben's got a doctor's appointment coming up, or I need to book in the dentist for Jane, or, who actually remembers all of this stuff, the mental load of organising, we've run out of dog food. All of that, it tends to be the women.
Yeah. It's another job in itself.
It is.
Realistically, if you think about it, you've got 2 jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure that decision makers necessarily appreciate that. And you could say, well, that doesn't matter. But the reality is that I need to exist whilst also doing those things.
Yeah.
That's the fact of life. As a single mum, there isn't anybody else to do that. I remember one job advert for a fire safety consultancy, and one of the biggest draws that they wrote on the advert was, we take our staff away for, I can't remember, 3 or 4 days on a team building exercise every year. And this was promoting, this was a big plus.
Yeah.
In their,
like an add-on kind of
yes,
thing. Yeah.
This was seen as a positive. And I looked at that and I went, that's great.
Childcare for 4 days.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I could not go. There is no way in my situation I could have gone away for 3 or 4 days at that time. It wasn't possible for a variety of reasons. And I thought, isn't it interesting, because they're promoting this job based on something that actually precludes me from applying.
Yeah.
And yet they don't realise that. They think that they're promoting something that's a good thing. It's almost like, look,
exciting.
We're giving you a free holiday.
Yeah.
And actually for me, it's going, and I can't apply.
I think as well, I had a boss, this is years ago, and he didn't like hiring, and he said this obviously away from HR and stuff. He said he didn't really like hiring women in like early 30s.
Wow.
This was years ago, so this was probably about 10, 12 years ago. And I just thought, why is that? And we just had someone who he just hired who got pregnant.
Right.
And I found it so interesting to think you could be missing out on hiring someone who's absolutely extraordinary. And just because she would need to have, you know, six to a year off, but she'd come back still being extraordinary.
Yeah.
Probably more extraordinary because then she's just got the job of being a mother as well, which heightens everything, like your brain and your experiences and your empathy. And I just think, and as someone who I think it's incredible being a single mum, and there's women out here who want to do it on their own. They want to adopt. They want to, you know, they don't necessarily need a man to do it. But you're right. I feel like work does potentially cause a break for that because, you know, maternity leave and not having someone else supporting you, but then the company doesn't give good maternity leave and things like that. I think in general, like, it's absolutely incredible like what you've done as a single mum, but you're so right. I think companies need to look at that and realize that we've got these extraordinary people who could bring us so much joy and experience and just a new lease of the business and how we work, and potentially, like you said, people aren't applying or not getting the job for certain reasons like that. So it's really nice to actually talk to someone that is also like completely on that level.
No, I'm totally on that level. It was really interesting. I remember going for promotion at a particular consultancy, and I was being interviewed by two of my colleagues, which was fine, and they knew my situation. They knew I was a single mum. I'd fairly recently become a single mum, and my child was fairly small at that point. And one of the interviewers said to me, could you give me an example of where you've multitasked? And she was completely straight-faced. She wasn't a mother. And I just wanted to burst out laughing. I was like, my entire life is multitasking. On what and I had to give a straight answer about work because I didn't feel comfortable going, are you kidding me? I'm thinking about 5 different things at the same time as I'm doing a report for you, or, you know, multitasking is just a way of life for me. I think you're actually you're absolutely right about the job issue, though. Really interesting you say about the your colleague or your boss previously. I went for a job heading up a safety consultancy, and I got the job, and I was very careful not to mention children. And at that time, I had a fairly small child, and I wasn't on my own. And I knew this would be quite a big job with travel, and that was absolutely fine. I talked it over with my partner and we'd work that out. And then there was something when I was signing the contract that meant I mentioned, you know, there was an inference that I was a mother. They withdrew that contract.
That is mental.
And they didn't ask me, there's a lot of travelling, are you okay with this? They said, now that we know you're a mum, there is no way you can do that travel. And they made that decision for me. And looking back, I mean, at the time, I didn't have the confidence, and I wouldn't have wanted to work for a company that made that decision.
No.
But, oh my word, how interesting.
Mental.
Yeah. It when people say it doesn't happen anymore, back to the survey and the men saying we've got equality sorted, and back to the women going, oh no, let me tell you the examples that I can give.
Just because you've hired us doesn't necessarily mean that you've got equality.
No.
But so what would your advice be then for a woman new to the industry?
Somebody said a quote that has really stuck with me, and it was, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that has really stuck with me. So, I have been really keen to join various things, but actually when I get there, it's clear that I am being tolerated.
Yeah.
This is not my tribe, and I am not, I want to say I'm not welcome there. That's probably a little bit extreme, but the vibe is that I'm there slightly under duress, that I'm being tolerated. And that is incredibly emotionally draining.
Yeah.
I would definitely say, particularly the fact that we are multitasking and we've got so much on our plates as a rule, take that off your plate. Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Yeah.
I think, the obvious one is find like-minded people. So join Women Talking Fire.
Yeah.
That's a great source of being able to ask other women, well,
Yeah.
what's it like in your organisation? Because we do talk. The amount of women who come to me and go, I need to move jobs, Andrea. I can't stay there.
It drains you.
It does.
Yeah.
Where should I go?
Yeah.
And, so yeah, just find your tribe.
Yeah.
Find mentors. I'm not seeing women looking a huge amount for mentors.
Yeah.
Or sponsors. So
Yeah.
people who will, celebrate your name and encourage people to think about you in rooms where you are not. I think that's a really important thing. There's a great woman on LinkedIn who helps women get the jobs they deserve and the salaries they deserve. She's called Jo Phillips. And she says 10% of your career progression is down to performance. Well, the other 90% is about everything apart from performance.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure as women, I think we become so focused on being good at what we do because we are.
Yeah.
As a rule, we're diligent and we are good at what we do.
Yeah.
But we haven't quite worked out the 90%, which is the networking and the mentorship and the sponsorship and actually, it's not what you know necessarily, it's who you know. So I do think there's a definite place. If I was going to do it again, I'd do more of that earlier on, I think.
Yeah. So finally, what is next for Women Talking Fire?
Yeah, so we're just in the process of starting to move towards WTF 2.0.
Oh, cool.
So our acronym is WTF.
Love that.
It's memorable.
Loved it. I loved it. When it's like, what was your WTF moment? I just loved that.
Yes. So we're just on the initial journey towards sort of becoming a little bit more professional. We know now 2 years in that there's an interest in what we're doing. There's support for what we're doing. We're here to stay. We weren't certain about that in the beginning, so we did a fairly rudimentary version of what we wanted to do. So now we want to professionalize a little bit more in terms of branding and marketing and all the rest of it. We're absolutely delighted that we are just about to take on 2 sponsors for a year. Starting in September. So we've got Apollo Fire Detectors and Kiwa are going to be our sponsors.
Amazing.
We are looking for a third at the moment. So, we're going to have 3 sponsors. We're not a membership organisation. So, a membership model would pay a membership fee and that would fund what we do.
Yeah.
There are costs to what we do.
Yeah, of course.
Ridiculous, incidental costs that just add up. So we need to find a way of paying for that. And, thank you to industry who've been incredibly supportive of what we're doing. And thank you to Apollo Fire Detectors and Kiwa who are doing that for us for the next year. We're also in discussions with Fire Safety Matters in terms of their live conferences and joining them in some capacity at future events. So that's really good. It looks like we'll still be at the fire safety event, which is always a great event in Birmingham.
Yep.
and hopefully London Build as well. That's always a good one for us. And then the thing that we're starting to plan now is a technical conference for June 2026, and that will be held in Winchester at a hotel.
Oh, amazing.
And we'll have a number of speakers, and we'll come together as a group to have a technical conference.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, and at that point, I do want to say thank you to all the committee of Women Talking Fire. There's about 10 of us, and they put in, they volunteer their time, they put in the hours to help. Rachel Potter does an amazing job on our social media. I think the last month we had 27,000 views.
Wow.
I mean,
that's incredible. That's amazing.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So,
which is great because you're just getting out there. Everyone's just seeing you. Which is
exactly. And, we're learning the marketing side of things. Most of us are techies.
Yeah.
We're very good on the technical fire safety front, but we're having to learn this whole world of social media and marketing and all of that. But yeah, really, really great plans for Women Talking Fire going forward. And as I say, we've had the confirmation now that what we're doing, supporting and networking and increasing the visibility of women is important, and there's a significant part of the industry who agrees with that. Yeah. So we're here to stay.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so excited to continue to see your work.
Oh.
And it's been so nice talking to you as well. Like, I've honestly feel like I've also learned so much today, which has been great.
Absolute pleasure, and thanks very much for being such a great host.
Oh, thank you.